Well, this year is a special election year, but next year it is a governor's election year, and the primary for California's gubernatorial election is just about 9 months out, June of 2026. Voters in the state were polled about the official candidates so far by Emerson College earlier this month. That survey shows former Representative Katie Porter in the lead with 16 percentage points. But right behind her is Republican Steve Hilton with 10%. And then another Republican, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco at 8%. Former Secretary of Health and Human Services and former Attorney General of California Javier Becerra is at 5%. More than a third of voters say they are still undecided. Still plenty of movement yet to come. Very interesting to see two Republicans following Katie Porter in the second and third slot. If you combine their numbers together, you even get a better story as to where this race really may be. And one of those Republicans, the leading Republican in this gubernatorial election so far, joins us right now on Inside the Issues. It is Steve Hilton joining us from the Bay Area. Really happy to have you here, Steve. Welcome to Inside the Issues. So happy to have you on.
It's fantastic to be with you. And we've been trying to make this happen for a while, so I'm really happy that we could do it tonight. Thank you.
Well, we really have. I'm glad you acknowledge that because we want to get your voice on the show. This has been a very interesting race already, and the election is still a way away. And you see the polling, and people know something about you. You're a Fox News host. You've been a CEO. You're an author. You're a strategist for UK Prime Minister David Cameron. So you've been around with politics and also here in the Golden State. Tell me why all that adds up to you being our next governor.
So I love this state so much. I moved here in 2012 from the UK, as you mentioned, with my wife and my two sons. I taught at Stanford University, started a business here, a new career in the media, as you mentioned. But I think as the years went on, I felt so strongly that this beautiful state that we love so much is really seriously going off the rails. It's such a struggle for people to make ends meet. You know, my parents were Hungarian immigrants back in England. I grew up in a working class family with a single mother. I know what it's like to struggle financially, you know, and you see that now right across the board in California. We have the highest poverty rate in the country. I've started restaurants and other small businesses back in the UK and here in California. If you're a small business owner in California, it's a nightmare with all the regulations and the taxes. I could go on and on. And really the point is, after all those years of just talking about the problems on TV, when I think about my business experience, my government experience, I really felt that I can make a contribution, not just to complaining about the problems, but developing the solutions. And so 3 years ago, I started a policy organization, Golden Together, been traveling the state, talking and listening and finding out what the priorities are and then developing solutions to the issues we face in California. And then I made the decision earlier this year to actually get into the arena and run for governor to try and make the change happen. Because I think everyone knows we can't go on like this in California. It is time for change, and I hope to be leading it.
Well, you know, Steve, you laid out a lot of the issues, and I hope to get into some of them with you tonight. But first and foremost, a lot of people also just think about a Republican running for a state-level office in California. We haven't seen one win in a while. Is there room for even one Republican, let alone two? So you have Chad Bianco, who is really close to you in the polling so far. Why you and not him? Because we have to see a consolidation, I think, for a Republican to make it, right?
Well, my argument is that I have the range of experience necessary, not only to win the election, but to do the job well. I've worked at the heart of a government back in the UK as senior advisor to a prime minister. Of course, it's not the same as California, but it's the same scale of challenge. I've been there fighting the bureaucracy, trying to implement change in government. It's really difficult, and I've learned a lot of lessons from that. I've also got that business experience, the focus on getting things done. My first job was project manager for a construction company. You really need to understand the details, asking the right questions, making things happen. And I've been working on the policy challenges, as I said, for years now. I just wrote a book, Califailure, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. Part 2 of the book is called Califuture. It is a comprehensive plan to turn things around in California to help working families, in particular small businesses, to make this state what it should be, the best in America, to start a family, to buy a home, build a business. All those things are so hard right now in California. I think I've got the experience and the ideas to actually turn things around.
Well, we didn't see either you nor Chad Bianco on stage yesterday at the gubernatorial forum thrown by the National Union of Healthcare Workers. The top 5 polling Democrats were there. I was also there asking some questions. Redistricting, Prop 50, a big topic there as it is in the state. I know you have some thoughts. In fact, I brought you up is one of my questions about this issue. Let's take a listen. I'll have you respond to Betty Yee, who gives us an answer. A Republican gubernatorial candidate, Steve Hilton, has gone to the federal courts. He's asking for an injunction. He seeks to block Prop 50 on grounds of violating the Equal Protection Clause and diluting votes. And there are millions of Republican voters in California who feel politically neglected, and they feel that if Prop 50 passes, they will be even further disenfranchised by having less Republican representation in the House of Representatives. So what would you say to those Republican voters? What is your vision for them in your California as governor?
Look at who's representing you now. You have a congressman who voted for health care cuts, voted for the Medicaid cuts, did nothing, made no effort to keep the critical access status of your rural hospitals that are closing in 2 weeks, and was the leading voice of cutting food assistance even before the big ugly bill.
Your response there to candidate Betty Yee?
Well, of course, she dodged the question about representation and the fact that if Prop 50 goes through, millions of Republicans, and not just Republicans, non-Democrats, people who want change in California, will be disenfranchised. Their voices will be silenced effectively. But she also, by the way, said something completely untrue about healthcare. The reason that community hospitals, and I've been on the road and I've seen this and I've talked to these communities affected by this, the reason that these hospitals are closing is entirely due to Democrat policy in California. The costs that are being piled on to those hospitals and the demands that are being piled on through the absolute massive scale of illegal immigration we've seen in California. That's the reason that these community hospitals are closing. So she not only dodged the main question on Prop 50, but she took the opportunity to tell things to the audience there that are simply not true about the damaging consequences of Democrat policy on healthcare in California.
Well, Steve, I'd love to talk about the big, beautiful bill and its potential impacts on some of these rural hospitals and Medicaid and beyond, because that's a big talking point. But before we get there, I also want to talk about your lawsuit, which you filed about over a month ago, I believe, against Prop 50. And recently you also went to the court asking for an injunction to block it from going forward as a special election. And the grounds for it, for you, constitutionally, are this Equal Protection Clause and dilution of votes. But I'm sure you're aware the Supreme Court has protected partisan gerrymander, and it's only race-based gerrymander that is illegal, according to the Supreme Court. So how do you view your argument? What argument are you making?
Well, specifically, if you look at that case that you're citing there, and you're quite right about the overall position, it was John Roberts who wrote that opinion. Explicitly, in that opinion, he says this, of course, does not rule out legal challenges based on the one person, one vote standard of equal protection. That's explicitly in that Supreme Court opinion. So the door is open legally to our challenge, and that's why we went through it. And it's incredibly important that we understand the basic point here. Equal protection has been defined in the Constitution and by the courts over the years as meaning a number of things. Number one person, one vote. Everyone can agree with that. Secondly, every vote should have equal value. One person's vote shouldn't be worth more in the system than anyone else's vote. And then thirdly, this is the crucial point, in the courts, federal and California, that standard of every vote should have equal value has been defined as meaning that districts should have roughly equal population. Now, how can they possibly guarantee that standard is met if you don't have a census? That's why districting has been attached to the census that takes place every 10 years. So you can have an accurate reading of the population and guarantee the districts are roughly equal in size. Since the last census, millions of people have left California, driven out by Democrat policies, high taxes and high costs and so on. You've had whole neighborhoods burned to the ground. How on earth can they meet that standard? The answer is they can't. And that's why we filed this lawsuit in federal court to stop this. And by the way, to stop them wasting $250 million of our money on this special election that no one asked for, no one wants, and is basically a contribution to Gavin Newsom's presidential campaign. That's the reason it's happening.
And Steve, I mean, part of what you're talking about then is also just an issue, as you see it, constitutionally, potentially, with mid-decade redistricting. Because theoretically, mid-decade redistricting would be out of date with the census. But I'm sure you also know about the 2006 Supreme Court case coming out of Texas, which actually says that mid-decade redistricting is okay, according to the Supreme Court. Have you contemplated that in some of your legal arguments?
Well, it's a different argument. That the reason that they took that position was it was a different legal case that was made that led to that argument. The equal protection argument that we're making on population size being equal, that hasn't been tested. And that's why we're filing this case. And actually on the law, the argument is very clear. The question is, can we get them to engage in time to actually stop this from happening before we waste the money on it?
Others have said they would be having to unsettle lots of precedent, at least since 2019 with the Rucho v. Common Cause case that you're talking about, that John Roberts wrote, that you say opens a door. We'll have to see it all play out. I appreciate you going back and forth on the legality of it, because it's just one aspect of it. And the special election is coming down the pike, and a lot of it is about, look, control of the House will mean many policies for Democrats may or not be enacted in D.C. But if we get back to California, I mean, you've also looked at affordability, housing as being key issues. What would you say is a single largest driver of the affordability crisis in California?
Well, actually, the number one reason people are leaving California is housing costs. We have the highest housing costs in America and now the lowest home ownership. But actually, if you add up all the other factors that are making it so impossibly expensive to live here, the reason why we have the highest poverty rate in the country, gas prices, electricity prices. We have highest gas prices in the country, highest electricity bills anywhere except Hawaii. They've doubled in the last 10 years. They are double the national average. And then housing costs. The underlying driver of all of that is the climate elitism that's being pushed by the Democrats who've been in charge of our state. The climate policies are what are causing these massive increases in costs. And that's why we have to be realistic and have common sense on climate policy rather than the kind of extremism. For example, demanding that we shut down our own oil and gas industry in California. Instead, we're shipping in oil from halfway around the world on giant super tankers, spewing out carbon emissions. That adds to the cost. Some of the regulations on house building that are totally extreme compared to other parts of the country make it 4 or 5 times more expensive to build the exact same house or apartment here in California than it does in other states. And of course, on electricity, this obsession with unreliable wind and solar power rather than affordable, reliable natural gas or eventually nuclear power, all that can change. And that's why I'm running for governor, to make those common sense changes.
And I just wanted to get your perspective on what we're seeing from Democrats, Governor Gavin Newsom. There's some moderating on climate. We're seeing it with the budget that went through. Governor Newsom said, he wants to see broader exemptions for CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which a lot of people have used to stifle some production, which speaks to some of your point. Also, this new package of bills Newsom signs that allows for 2,000 oil wells in Kern County annually to try and help with oil costs. I mean, what's your response to what we're seeing?
First of all, on the housing, let's just be clear. The moves that they're making on housing don't change the fundamental attitude they have, which is it's all about, in their view, what they call density, where you can only build inside the current developed area in California. So all those things in those bills only apply. The CEQA exemptions, environmental regulation exemptions only apply to buildings that happen if it's infill development. They simply won't allow us to do what is normal and natural and is the basis of the California dream, which is to build single-family homes, which is what people want, where they can raise their families with a yard and enjoy our weather. That's the California dream, and they're against it because of the climate agenda that dictates almost everything they do. So there's, and actually, but also included in those bills that Gavin Newsom touted as the solution to the climate, to the housing crisis, is a hidden tax. It's called VMT, vehicle miles traveled. And if you build the kind of housing they don't approve of, you're going to be paying thousands of dollars a month in a hidden tax. So actually, I think yet again, it's this climate elitism that undermines everything that they're trying to do to make the California dream of affordable home ownership a reality for everyone.
I mean, you see the polling. It is affordability. It is housing and the economy. These are the top issues for Californians. I appreciate you speaking to them. Before I let you go, we also saw Governor Gavin Newsom sign SB 53, a nation-leading AI regulation bill. We haven't seen it on the federal level. A lot of people still feel it doesn't go far enough in the state level, but look, it's requiring disclosures of some of these large tech AI companies. It's protecting whistleblowers. And you've spoken a lot about there being too much regulation in California in business, which is why businesses are going away. What's your response to SB 53? What would you say is the next dimension of regulation required for AI without stifling innovation and sending those businesses out of California?
It's a classic example of bureaucratic thinking. thinking. The people we've got in charge in California, going back to where I started, they're not business-like people. They think that a bureaucratic process is going to solve every problem, and that's why we're just drowning in red tape and bureaucracy. And that's what these AI regulations really are. All they're going to do is add cost and hassle to companies without actually dealing with the fundamental questions that they're trying to address. And so I just think that they're not going to deliver what they want. They're just going to add to the hassle of running a business in California. And it's a very important part of the AI conversation. It's a world-beating industry here in California. We need to support it. One of the main things that we need for that is energy, affordable, reliable energy. So yet again, the climate agenda is undermining that.
But nothing to regulate with AI before I let you go, because we're out of time. But just real quick, is there
I think we have to explore. I'm an optimist about AI, and I look at the potential, for example, to transform education and healthcare. And I think that the people running those companies are very, very conscious of the impact that they're having. And I think that that's the right way to think about it right now in its infancy.
Listen, Steve, I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for a really long time about all these policies. We're just getting started, so I hope we get a chance to do it again. I want to thank you so much for coming on and having the conversation really robust. It was really, really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Steve Hilton, gubernatorial candidate for, well, the governor's mansion 2026, one of the leading Republicans, in fact, the leading Republican in the election. It's going to be a very interesting election, very interesting policies to discuss. Thanks to Steve Hilton for being on.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.